am the discharge coordinator here at the St. Louis Forensic State Hospital. That's not what we're called. It's early. I'm a social worker. I've been here for about 16 years, and I've been working very closely with Lizzie Kaczarski and our team to develop this protocol for the state hospitals and DD.
I'm Lizzie Kaczarski. I am with DD. I am the case management supervisor for the North City team. We work to transition people from NICI's State Operative Facility Forensic Treatment Center into the community. So we're going to talk about this process. So the biggest reason that we're doing this is we are working to make sure that everybody is doing the same thing across the state in the same way, as well as to look to eliminate pain points. What we're going to do during this meeting is we're just going to talk about how the process was updated, what the changes to the processes are, and to give you guys a general overview of that process. So we are going to look at eliminating pain points that existed in previous iterations of this across the state. We want to create a consistent process. We want to form a collaborative experience between, we want to perform a collaborative group effort between DD and behavioral health, and then also with our community partners. And then most importantly, we want to streamline the discharge process from state-operated facilities into the community.
I'm going to kind of talk about why that's important from a DBH perspective, because I know a lot of you on the call are from the DD side. So obviously, we want to make sure that our clients are in their least restrictive setting and are receiving the most appropriate treatment that they can get. Also, to open bed space and resources for our clients that are incompetent to stand trial for our IST wait list. And we currently have 200 people in jail waiting on beds for state-operated facilities, and so that's another big reason that we wanted to expedite this process so it went more quickly and we could get these clients out into the community, which is really their most appropriate setting anyway.
So what are the things that have changed? The biggest one is that previously, case management always went to whoever was the TCM provider, state or private, and now it is always going to go to the state coordination, the state regional office. The other thing is that we had several different processes across the state to achieve the same goal, and now we're going to have one process. The other one is that we found that with intake, we were, again, having different ways to get people into the intake process to access DD. And again, the idea is that we have one process to start to finish across the state.
So for those of us at state facilities, and again, I know that there's not many of us on the call, but the process is started by having a DBH social worker or discharge coordinator email a template that we're going to go over in a minute to the intake coordinators. We could also do that with a phone call, but we prefer to do it with the email template because it has all the information that intake will need. The DBH social worker will also send collateral documentation, especially if we have that, because that also helps expedite that process. The RO intake will contact the guardians and or the consumer to initiate that intake process, and then DD intake will then determine eligibility. So again, this is the where we send the intake assessment. We send the regional center office the email template, and this is what the email template looks like. And those of us at the state hospitals will have a copy of this email template that we can send to intake. And also somebody over at intake will have a copy of it in case it goes missing or people leave and it kind of gets lost in the shuffle. But it basically just has the demographic information about the guardian, et cetera.
So, of course, after that information is received from intake and received to intake and assessment from behavioral health, the intake department will review collateral information to make sure that there is a valid diagnosis to both determine eligibility for DD services. They will also schedule the appointment for the assessment to determine functional limitations, as well as determine if there is an appropriate diagnosis for referral to DD. Within that referral packet, it's just kind of our normal process, right? So intake and assessment says this person has a qualifying diagnosis for DD, they determine functional limitation, and then they determine whether or not that person is waiver eligible. From that point forward, it's our normal DD side process, right? The consumer is assigned to a service coordinator. Within 30 days, the ISP meeting is completed. Within 60 days, the ISP is submitted for review and approval. But the big thing is the ISP must be completed before a consumer can enter the consumer referral database. What goes into that utilization review packet is what we always put into a utilization review packet. We must make sure that there is an assessment that's been completed for the consumer. Then we must make sure the LOC is entered, that ISP has all of its relevant components in it. We want to make sure that we're requesting the waiver slot at the time. And then we want any collateral forms and documentation attached to show that the consumer is ready to move into the community. Once that person has gone through the UR process and they've been deemed eligible for placement in a residential care setting, we are going to take that UR packet. They're going to be placed on the consumer referral database with all of the documentation. They're going to remain on that database until the provider is identified. The risk prevention consultant will monitor the consumer referral database and inform the SD of any providers accepting the case. And then just like any other consumer going into a residential setting on the DD side, once we have that provider identified, we schedule a meet and greet between the provider, the consumer, their family, and their guardian. We ensure that housemates are compatible, and we have that discussion about what services will be necessary for the consumer to transition into the community. Not every consumer at a state-operated facility will have behavioral risks, but every consumer should have their behavioral risks assessed and determined prior to discharge or even during the initial ISP meeting. So what that means is that if we need to have a behavior support plan developed, one will be ready. Uh-oh.
We lost power. I think we just completely lost power.
Can you go back? Can you guys still hear us?
We can still hear you, yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I think we lost power. I apologize.
Okay, if there is not a behavior support plan, then the SC will lead the team. The team should be both people from the state-operated facility as well as the team that will be accepting the consumer to create and implement that safety crisis plan. If it is deemed necessary, a functional behavior assessment will be requested when the transition amendment is completed.
So I'm going to talk about the DBH discharge process because, you know, the process through DD obviously is pretty complicated, as is the process for clients coming out of state institutions. So our clients have a lengthy hospitalization. The average length of stay for the state hospitals is anywhere between 6 and 7 years, and that's at each facility. So if a client came to us from Fulton, for example, they may actually have close to 10 to 15 years in state institutions. Clients here obviously receive specialized treatment for their mental health needs. And again, not all the clients that we have a mental illness. We do have a significant amount of clients that also are just primarily intellectually disabled or have a developmental disability. And so often they are better served in a DD population. We do have an internal discharge process which requires administrative review and approval. Discharges may require risk assessments or other official reports. Discharges may also require approval from the court or notification to the court. Clients that are NGRI, which is not guilty by mental disease or defect, discharges, and those are clients that have committed a crime, have been committed to the Department of Mental Health, and we can only discharge them with approval from the court. And that also requires central office approval, our forensic review approval, and court approval in order to discharge those clients. We also have clients that are permanently incompetent to stand trial, or we also call them PIST. Those discharges may also require our forensic review committee approval, as well as notification of discharge to the court. But not all require that, but many do. Lizzie?
Okay. So, person has been deemed eligible by behavioral health, and then what's going to happen is that they're going to actually start that transition process. The transition process in its totality is followed and executed. So this includes both pre and post-transition calls. The thing to notice is that the sending SC is, of course, responsible for the approval of all plans, budgets, and sharing of other documentation. The receiving SC will report any issues to the sending SC. And during those calls, we will, of course, discuss who will complete monitoring if it's outside of the service area, that sort of thing. The other thing is that the sending regional office will complete the health inventory within 7 days of the move. So just like a normal transition, there is, of course, the 30-day post-move call that is held. And normally at this time, we would discuss accepting the transfer, the movement from Regional Office 1 to Regional Office 2. The big change is that we used to have 30, 60, and 90-day calls to make sure that that transition went well. No longer is there the mandate for the 60 and 90-day calls. It is up to the team to decide whether or not it is appropriate to transfer at the 30-day mark.
And I would say oftentimes things come up that we usually tend to do the 30, 60, 90 days still. Social Security issues, Medicaid issues, that sort of thing tends to kind of hold up that process. This is the process map, which none of us can read because it's too small, so I apologize. But for those of you that are interested, it will be posted when the presentation is posted.
This is the Tier 2 webpage. This will talk you through the transitions process, and then it's a direct link to the community transition webpage. Okay,
now we're on to questions, and I do see.
So what is the referral process to the community?
So from the Department of Behavioral Health, what we do, like we talked about at the beginning, is we send a referral to intake, and it just starts that process. But we don't do that lightly. We assess the client for readiness for discharge. Prior to doing that, we have a discussion with the legal guardian. I would say 99% of the clients that we send through Regional Center for Discharge do have a legal guardian. And then we just start that process that we talked about. So we don't decide to discharge somebody lightly. We want to make sure that they're psychiatrically and medically stable enough to be discharged to the community. There are times that clients do have behaviors, but they're behaviors that usually could be handled probably better in the community than they can in a state hospital.
So the other part of this is that a lot of clients that are being referred by behavioral health into DD are still 6 months to a year from being eligible to transition into the community. So we're holding those cases open to, not holding them open, we are opening them with the intention to discharge into the community, knowing that it will take time and adjustment prior to somebody getting into the community. Second question, are we saying they have to have Medicaid and a pay source such as SSI in place first? No, when somebody is in a state-operated facility, they do not qualify for Medicaid or SSI. What we have to know is that they will qualify for Medicaid and they will qualify for SSI. So what happens is that the behavioral health side often applies for Medicaid 30 days? 30-ish days prior to discharge. And then SSI, typically once we have that discharge date, either the receiving agency, the residential provider will set up, or the guardian will set up that SSI appointment, so that all of that is running through prior to somebody moving out. Does that make sense? Did we answer your question?
Talking to the void.
Yeah.
and I would say, again, most of the time, the Medicaid process goes pretty smoothly. Social Security, you know, I think that it just depends. You know, that's a beast that we have no control over because it's a federal process, and we don't always have control over whether a client gets Social Security or not. I think it seems to be said from the community, you know, clients often get denied Social Security. I would say that 9 times out of 10, our clients qualify just because they've been in a state institution for a long time. So it shows the validity of their diagnosis.
So how would a provider be aware of who is looking for placement in the community? Again, every consumer is placed on the consumer referral database, so they are approved for placement. I know we don't call it placement order anymore, but they're approved to go on the consumer referral database, and then they're referred. Once they're on that, it is on providers of DD to review that list to see who would be a good match for them. Does the individual have to be approved for a comprehensive waiver slot before they are placed on the consumer referral database? Yes. So by default, somebody who's in a state-operated facility and has both been determined eligible for DD and waiver eligible is then placed on the consumer referral database. Once the client is sent to an SC to start the ISP, are these state SCs or private targeted case management providers?
That is a good question.
So that is the big change. They are supposed to be state regional offices.
However,
there
are some small parts of the state that are still TCM. I think our sister facility in Farmington still gets those services through a TCM agency, but that's in discussion for potentially changing. But I think every other facility in the state either is served by St. Louis or Kansas City.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that is a big change. It used to be just whoever was the TCM in the county. It is now primarily state SCs.
Any more questions? Okay, well, with that, we want to thank you all for attending today. And, there's a couple more questions.
Okay, so this is about the MOS, our internal assessment at DD. So the question is, does the consumer's MOS assessment need to be completed before the process can begin or after? I'm running into issues with some SCs regarding this. So the MOS is new and we're figuring it out on the DD side. My understanding is that when somebody comes into DD from behavioral health, that person will have their full MOS completed that will include the part that is about placement, their RAS score, that whole assessment is done by intake at the beginning. And Becky's right, CMRO actually does Fulton State Hospital.
Sorry,
Becky.
Missed that. Okay, I'm going to give it another minute and make sure there's no more questions before we end. But again, we really appreciate you all attending today.
This does not
pertain
to HAB centers, Jamie, I'm sorry. That is a new ball of wax. We're trying to figure it out.
Is there a time estimate of the process completion? Is there a specific contact person I can ask when I'm having these issues?
Jamie, can you email me? And we can work together on this.
And that's the HAB center?
Yeah.
Okay.
Lizzie, go ahead and put your email address in the chat, please.
Oh, you do it.
Well, we need to do it for everybody.
Oh.
Nope.
Oh. Oh.
We're gonna figure this out, I'm sorry.
There we go. Sorry.
No, this does not pertain to people in private hospitals. This is only for state-operated facilities at this time.
And I believe there is another initiative working on that, but we are not part of that.
Sorry.
You're fine. Okay, well, I think that we will end now. Thank you, everybody, for attending, and we really appreciate your questions. And you are also free to reach out to me, and I will put my email also in the chat. And, you know, if I don't know the answer, then I will get the answer for you. Oh my gosh, I don't even know what my email is, but I'll put that in there in just a second. There we go. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.